Hello and welcome back to Generationally Yours, the intergenerational podcast that addresses sustainability, real estate and tech. I am Joseph Michael Daniels.
And I am Catalina Valentino.
And today we have our first political guest. Yes, we are entering the realm of politics, but scarily, you want to know who this guest is? Well, she's the only solo female leader of a political party in Britain left. I have to say, from Britain, that's quite shameful to only have one female leader, but I will venture into that. And why are we bringing on a political guest today? Well, if you're listening, you know that we talk about intergenerations. And a boomer and a Gen Xer probably spent their time at university and then spent 20 or 30 years training and learning in that environment and became great at that and had a job. But millennials and Gen Z, and if you're a millennial that went to university and ended up post-degree having a coffee shop, I love you, but it happens. And Gen Z actually moving jobs and asking for more from employers, and the skills now being more digital, we are entering a time where job change, skill change and learning is happening at a rapid pace, and the enablement of that is obviously working with AI. So one of the key topics that we're going to talk about today is job transitioning. How are we enabling the future? And this individual, this female leader, the only one we've got, actually passed the first bill around universal basic income, which we'll break more into. So Jane, please could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Jane Dodds. I am the leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats and I sit in the Welsh Parliament. And I've been there for about 2.5 years. I've got another 2.5 years to go till the next election.
Cool. So
Fabulous.
Two things. In the first question I'm going to ask you for people that are listening, because it's political, what is... Young people aren't voting, we'll get onto digital voting, right? Most people feel like they haven't got a voice, right? What is the difference, first and foremost, between the Liberal Democrats, Conservative, and Labour and Green parties?
Okay, so just one sentence on each. So it's the elevator pitch, isn't it, really? Labour, they believe in the state. The state will support you in everything. That's fabulous. Conservatives believe in small state, so everybody can get on their bike. Do you remember that old phrase that was used? Get on your bike, do things, entrepreneurial, it's down to you. Liberal Democrats are about giving you the tools to make the choices you want. So making sure you've got the resources, the opportunities to then move on. Bit of a combination of both. We're sort of down the middle. And then the Green Party, obviously their big agenda is about green policies and the green agenda. So that's it in a nutshell.
Wow, very interesting. And so, I mean, of course, we all know each other quite well here, but I know for the listeners here today, they would love to hear your background, how you got into this and what drives you to be in politics.
Sure. Well, I was born in a very small sort of town up in North Wales. I went to a Welsh-speaking school. My family all spoke Welsh at home. In fact, my grandmother, she lived with us. She couldn't speak English. So we all had to speak Welsh. So that's the first thing. Welsh culture, everything was really important to us. And then I went away to university. I did a bit of work before I did that. And I trained to be a social worker. Then I worked in child protection social worker for about 25 years. And I kept thinking, hang on, I'm here doing this child protection social work and I'm coming across families, children, young people, and I'm doing my bit to help them, I hope. But actually the system needs changing. It's all wrong. So I thought, I need to do something about the whole system. And that's where I thought, maybe I can make a difference in politics. And let me just say this one last thing. As a woman in politics, it's hard. It really isn't easy. But I would say to anybody, if you want to go for it, just go for it.
What's your view on the fact that you're the sole female leader? And to put that into context for everyone that's listening, Nicola Sturgeon was obviously the leader of the Scottish Party, left. Obviously, we have heavy male leadership post Theresa May, which was, let's talk about the disaster of the current government and the 3 prime ministers we didn't vote for. Yep, there's 3 of them we didn't vote for, just FYI. And they're still in control. Don't quite know how that works, but I'm sure we will learn that. And then obviously in Labour we have now Keir at the front, which, you know, again, I'm not going to get too political with this. Green Party is a joint co-leadership, if I'm not mistaken, and that's just in the UK, right? You're obviously the Lib Dem leader in Wales. Why do you think, considering we're meant to be one of the most forward-thinking, socially mobilising cultures out there, why do you think that you are the only female leader left?
I think it's an absolute tragedy, and I can't believe in 2023 that is the situation. Labour could have done it. They could have got a female leader, because there are some fabulous women in politics in the Labour Party. They really are. They're leaders, and I don't know why Keir Starmer just doesn't stand aside and say, over to you.
Ego?
Sorry?
Maybe ego?
No comment. We need to get more women into politics. That's the thing. And I know it's hard, and I'll tell you one of the main reasons it's hard is because of social media. And because of the threats you have on social media, because of the difficulties around that. You know, I've been threatened lots. I've had horrible things said about me. I've been threatened with execution.
Gosh.
My car's been surrounded by protesters. You know, there are big things for us to overcome, not just for women in politics, but for politicians. But really what we need is a better support mechanism to make sure that women get into politics. And then, you know, we also need to make sure that we have more gay people, more people with disabilities, people who've got from different backgrounds, more black people in politics. We've got a real huge mountain to climb. 50% of the population are women, and we need to get on with it. Can I just say one last thing? Welsh politics is changing in 2026. We're going to have a 50-50 gender quota. So the Welsh Parliament will have to be 50% women and 50% men.
Ooh, wow. As somebody who is an aspiring young female who potentially wants to go into politics, I mean,
You will. Yeah, you will.
I hope so. I mean, after our conversation, I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about. I mean, I don't even know where I would start with something like this. What would be the first, maybe 3 steps or a few steps to get into politics?
Great question. Work out your values. Work out politically where you are. Now, we have a political party system here in the UK. So it's then thinking, how do those values align with a political party? Then think, okay, I need to just go and find out a bit more about this political party, maybe go to some meetings, maybe go to some debates, maybe look at some of those politicians. And then you need to work out, well, where does my heart lie? Maybe it's in my local community, and maybe I want to do lots of council politics. That's how I started. I was a local councillor. Or maybe my heart is in something in London, for example. You've got the GLA here, haven't you? And then in Wales, we've got the Welsh Parliament, the Scottish Parliament, or maybe it's in the UK Parliament. It's really up to you. So I think that's the first step. Go and get trained. There's loads of things out there. It's really important. And then I think the third thing is go and get your support, because it's really hard, but it's really worthwhile.
Wow.
Why isn't there a radical movement, right? So I'm very outspoken. I'm probably the only person at a convention the other day that just started laying into government policy. I actually made a joke that we have a department for levelling up, but would any of you trust Michael Gove to come in your house and level it up? And that's not about the Tory party at all. I've worked closely with them in the past. I met Boris Johnson a number of times. It's actually just about the root of politics. I believe that there is a revolution that needs to happen. And as you're aware, some of the work that we heavily do is around digitization of that voting system, enabling young people. And I was talking quite openly about the differential between the generations. And we talk about generations a lot, right? Because it's important. You know, over 65 is growing at a rate of number. The disconnect between Gen Z and understanding of boomers, the way we live, the lifestyle we live, the expectations, the wants, the needs. We do have AI, we have social media. There is a bigger voice online from people millennial Gen Z, but that doesn't transition into the voting. So it's a 2-part question. One, what do you think of the next steps are when it comes to the digitization of voting? And 2, does there need to be a radical change in the way that we engage with our population when it comes to politics?
Yeah, so firstly, definitely around digitisation. The first step really is for us as politicians to really make that step forward. And in the Welsh Parliament, you won't be surprised to know that we are looking at digital voting. So in our next Welsh Parliament elections, which 16-year-olds can vote in, we are looking at how they do that online. But I think there's something more than that. There's something about our political system. So our political system is really rooted in the old schools, the public schools, the Oxbridge and Cambridge, who think it's first past the post. If you win that race, that's fine, it doesn't matter. So that doesn't give you a stake in it. So we have to have a different system. As Liberal Democrats, we stand for proportional representation, which literally is your vote will mean a seat. Okay, so that's, I'm not explaining that really well, but if you vote for somebody, that will count. It doesn't matter if they're in a Labour, a Conservative, a Liberal Democrat, a Green. That vote will count. It will have a stake in the next person who represents you. That's called proportional representation. That's what we need to see.
And can I outline what that kind of, just to equivalate that for a lot of people's minds that probably don't understand? The reality is that when you go and vote for your local borough, you're kind of just voting as a part of a pool. And that pool is then selected and your seat is selected. So you're represented by the pool where 45% of voters may have voted. And I think actually that's Brexit in a nutshell. The volume of people that probably weren't educated voted in one way. Brexit's left us in a mess. If you're listening, I hope this is real. If you're listening and you think Brexit was great, then we had an egotistical, arrogant outset that Britain was still as powerful as it was. And if you actually look at the global trends of the economy right now, you'll see the impacts of Brexit because of the job loss. And so that really falls into that ability to be pulled in, even though you've got complete differences of opinions, but the seats kind of mattered and the voted kind of mattered. And that's really important to understand. And I didn't know that actually, that if you vote, you have that voice and vote inside that ecosystem. So I just found that quite interesting. I just want to explain that a little bit more into, you're basically dropped in a pond.
Can I just go back to that thing you said about Brexit? Because it is based on that old premise of sovereignty. Now, how many of us know what that means? Well, I don't know what it means. And I think young people actually don't know what it means, quite rightly. And I wouldn't want to encourage people to know what that means. What we need is an emotional response to issues. And that's what politics should be about. It should be about an emotional movement. I want this to happen. I'm passionate about this particular issue. I hate this. I'm going to try and stop it. That's where we need to be, whereas we're just plodding along here in politics, and it is based on this old school public school system that says this is how you change things. Well, it's not. We want to be radical, we want to be progressive, we want to take risks. Things may work, things may not, but actually we need to ditch those old systems and we need to look at what's in people's hearts. What do they emotionally want? What do they want to see passionately change in their community, country, area, street, whatever?
Yeah, really great question. I typically like to ask the impact of Gen Z and future generations to come. What impacts maybe in a particular field they might have, given the political landscape at the moment. I know that this, I don't know what the stats are off the top of my head, but I know that a lot of young people in particular aren't voting. What do you think that can be done to improve that statistic? And also, what impact do you think that Gen Z would have on the future of the political system?
So I think I've said this before, we need to be looking at issues that can really reach out to people. Even that word issue, I hate it. Let's think about something that people get. So I know that lots of young people struggle with housing. You know, absolutely. Where do they go to live? Not just even buying a house. I mean, that's out of people's budget, I think. But just get somewhere nice to rent. Do we need a completely different system when it comes to our housing? Is that something people want? Is something that people want is to stop child poverty? That's something I really want to see. Is that something that gets you going? So let's find the things that really get people going. And it will change. It will change and be different. And it'll be different over time. We've got to be flex. We've got to be responsive. We've got to be thinking about things where we're more nimble and really ready to go on things. So that's the first thing I would see. Making voting more attractive and accessible is really, really important. So votes at 16, absolutely, but we need to prepare people a long time before that.
In school. Maybe train them about taxes and politics, because it literally defines your whole life in a country.
It absolutely does, but we've still got to get that emotional heart there that gets people going. And what influence will the Gen Z have on politics? Well, it'll change the whole thing. I really do passionately believe that we just need a whole different approach to getting more young people into politics. Now, I know that's a real kind of fluffy sentence, but that's exactly what it should be about.
What I find really crazy, right, and we were talking about this again at this most recent expo I did, you have literal positions that are fulfilled, like housing minister with someone that's never built a house. So for those that don't know, our housing strategy in the UK, when it's the biggest crisis we have, which creates more jobs than I'm pretty sure any other industry combined, actually you don't even have to have qualified and built a house. Now I know that's different in certain places like Canada. I know in Scandinavia you basically have to be qualified in that thing to manage it. Do you think that like Gen Z find the distrust in that you can become a trained politician, like to train to become a waffle speaker about a topic that you may or may not know, to then have advisors that probably don't actually communicate properly with the private sector? What do you think needs to change in that landscape, and what's different about the Lib Dems in specifically than it is, I imagine, what is all trained politicians in like the Tory party, for example?
So it distresses me most in politics than anything else, the fact that we've got a professional group of politicians. They have never done a day's work in their life outside of politics. So many people who are now MPs or work in the Welsh Parliament or the Scottish Parliament, they have been special advisors to politicians, they've worked in policy, they've worked in a political lobbying group or whatever, and then they've just gone on, maybe got a safe seat eventually and got elected. Now that is totally topsy-turvy. We need people who come from real life. We need people who've got a range of experiences who can say, yeah, I'm here to do this because I've done that and I believe passionately that I want to change. That's where we need to be.
How do you feel about that as a Gen Z? How do you feel that like the reality is that your choice of vote, even if you had a choice to vote, were people that were never qualified to do the job? And what I mean by being qualified, would you trust a surgeon to do open heart surgery on you if they actually weren't a surgeon?
Yeah, I mean, surprised, I guess. I mean, I don't really know quite how to phrase this, but coming from what you've just said there, I mean, I just completely agree. It's just the fact that we're living in a world right now where that is acceptable, and I think that people don't want to make that sort of wave of change because people are kind of scared of change, they don't like it, and everybody just has this one sort of streamlined way of thinking and just approaching things. But I do know that Gen Z have got opinions, a lot of them, and they're shouting about it on social media, but those don't necessarily translate into votes, and that's the thing that I think we're struggling with at the moment from my very limited, must I admit, understanding of politics. So I know that that's one thing that we'd like to work on as well, and with yourself, Jane, is the digitalisation of voting, because if Gen Z are all digital, then that is one way of kind of targeting those people. But also there's a lot of misinformation and lack of understanding, I mean, myself included. You know, I really don't know much about the political landscape, and what I do know, it's probably from a biased source. So I think that nurturing Gen Z and sort of educating them, or everyone in general, it's not just Gen Z, because my mum, Gen X, I think she doesn't know anything about politics, so she doesn't vote either. So that's not just a generational thing, but the educational side of things, B, the inspiration, which I know you touched upon earlier. I don't know quite how we go about doing that, but maybe that's a case of bringing in sort of people who are influencers, shall we say, people who people aspire to or look up to, even the people like Steve Bartlett, for example, who's in entrepreneurship, something that's kind of valuable of influence, and he can sort of start to talk about these challenges and these opinions and start diverting people to voting, but also then the accessibility, because I know that a lot of people, for example, let's say working moms, you know, they don't have necessarily the time to go out and go and post their vote or whatever it is that you've got to do with the whole voting system. And so I think that those three things, if we can start digitalizing the vote, from my point of view, that would just get rid of all of those issues.
You know, it's crazy as well. Like Jacob Rees-Mogg, they actually did gerrymander. Like gerrymandering basically means manipulating the voting system. And I find it absolutely hilarious. You, if you're listening, have to pay national insurance even if you don't use the NHS. You have to pay tax. But you aren't trained and don't have to pick the elected leadership. I think it should be mandated. I genuinely think that it should be, for not just the nation, but for the security of our future generations, it should be mandatory to vote. And if you are mandatory to vote, you should have to take a test on the policies.
So I would go a step before that. I would talk about a civic duty. There's other words. But how can we get to a place where we force people to do something that they don't know what it's about and that they don't have an investment in? I think there's something that says, look, if you believe in a democracy, if you believe in your country, your road, your community, your school, your college, your business, whatever, if you believe in that changing and being better, if you don't want your kids to do this, if you see a child in a playground you think is poor and needs a school meal, that's where we want you. And we think it's important that you get the opportunity to change that. Just one last thing. Kat, you know, we need more women in politics, and I'm just going to plug this big time, being the only sole female leader across the UK. It's really important we get more women into politics, and to do that, we really need to support women to be in politics, because it isn't easy, but there there are so many things that we can all change together. And it's standing up and saying, we've got to change things, and we need more women in politics at every level. And women died for us to vote. You know, if I meet somebody on the doorstep, a woman says, "No, I'm not voting," or my husband usually votes for me, I say, hang on, women literally died for you and me to vote. So whoever you vote for, just get out and vote.
Yeah, I love that. What impact do you think that women would have on politics?
Oh, they'd be totally different. So I think they change the whole dialogue around it. They change the emotional factoring in it. It'd be a kinder, more co-working place where we'd work together. I really do believe that, and men can do that as well. But I think perhaps men in the Westminster Parliament are just in a space where they're just fighting against each other all the time. I've been there. It's tribal. People shout, they scream, they can't bear working with anybody else. The Welsh Parliament's totally different, absolutely different. We believe in working together. If we want, and we are going to get, free school meals for every single child in Wales, that's about political parties working together to push that through. That's happened in Wales, free school meals for every single child in primary schools in Wales. That's going to tackle child poverty, and we believe in that. So let's do it together, and women can really change that.
I think that's important for people to recognise as well. So it's quite contrasting, and I wish I could remember the name of the show which Beverly Knight was the lead of. Our friend Beverly was the lead of, and it was about in the Labour Party post-war.
It was brilliant. I was just thinking of that with the votes.
And now women, she was literally thrown away and forced not to be Labour.
She won an Olivia Award for it.
Yeah, it was incredible. I wish I could remember the name. I may plug it in on the little bottom here. But I think what's interesting actually is seeing the Welsh Party and seeing that, okay, we all love free school meals. Anyone that's a Gen Z or millennial probably benefited from. You know, we were in a time of crisis post-2008. Post-2008, kids want free school meals. They've been removed by the current government. We look at energy, and our energy bills are insane. There is an energy kind of democratisation happening in Wales. So it does sound to me that, like, I think one of the things we can definitely take away from today, and before we go off onto closing comments, is that if we are looking at a Labour government, then actually, if the Labour and Lib Dems are doing this in Wales, why can't they be doing this across Great Britain? It sounds to me like there is some real revolutionary steps happening in the right way in Wales that is making me want to migrate to Wales, because ultimately there is no free school meals, and without that, you know, for people that are listening, I was homeless between 15 and 21. My dad was an abusive alcoholic. My mum was sectioned. I had to fight to get to where I am, and I had to have free school meals. I wouldn't have eaten. My dad would have just beat the crap out of me at the end of the day, and that would have been it. And that would have been hell for me without free school meals. Just free school meals and school clubs that they've taken away. They don't even understand. And do you think the actual current politicians really care? Do you think they're sitting there going, oh, but it's fine? None of them have experienced the poverty. None of them have really experienced that. And if you are listening, I think it's important to think about the investment you just said. You said what people are investing. You pay tax. You are forced to pay tax. That's an investment. So if you're investing and not voting, if you're paying tax and not voting, you are throwing your money away, in my opinion. Because if you are investing your tax and hard-earned money that you're forced to pay, then you should be able to have an impact on what is going on in this country. Jane, it's been amazing. Do you have any closing remarks? Do you have any closing things that you think you want to say, considering we've had this amazing discussion around liberal democracy?
I think there's really good things, isn't there, that are going on. Let's not forget, politics isn't all awful. There's some really good things, and I've just spoken about Wales, but there are some good things. There are some good people. I think what we need to see is a much bigger change, a revolutionary change that transforms society. Let's not be afraid. Let's go with our hearts here. You know, Greta Thunberg talks about her heart and changing things. What a fabulous example as a young woman who's changed the way we're thinking, who's stood up to the biggest politicians, who's spoken truth to power. Now, if that's you, just do it. Don't stop and think about it. Just get out and do it.
Great.
Amazing. Guys, we've learned today that actually Wales seems to be doing big movements, and that Labour's and Lib Dems being in control might not be a bad thing. We've also learned that job transition is really important and how the future of this culture is going to change, and that ultimately there's not enough equal representation, and that is quite disgusting. We should all probably, if you're watching or listening to this, take a view on that and encourage people to vote. Jane, it's been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, diolch yn fawr iawn.
There you go.
Tell Greta to allow me, I know that my carbon footprint's large.